Hello and good morning and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you once again for joining our event. I am Dang Espita Casanova of Cleaner Asia, and I will be your host for this session on translating integrated solutions into inclusive actions in Southeast Asia. So, before we start, I would like to flash some reminders for the session. Let me just pull that up. Okay. Some event reminders. So please be reminded that the whole event is recorded both in video and chat, and participants are requested to send their inquiries and comments via the Q&A and chat box. Facilitators and or resource speakers will respond via chat or live if time permits within the session. Interpretation function is also available in several languages. Please just click the headset logo on the lower right-hand side of the screen and choose the relevant language. Please make sure to mute the original audio to hear the translation. And lastly, if you are experiencing slow internet, switch to low definition from high definition mode with buttons on the lower right hand of the screen. So with that, I would like to call on Ms. Jane Kam of the Stockholm Environment Institute Center in Asia, who is a research associate with main responsibilities to support research related to Asia Center's work on city health and sustainable urbanization. She has a wide experience in analyzing policy effectiveness of air quality and policies in Southeast Asia. Jay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan, for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. My name is Zainikam, and I'm a research associate, as Dan mentioned, with Stockholm Environment Institute Asia. As we heard in the previous talks, air pollution has now been considered to be the world's largest environmental health threat, accounting for about 7 million deaths globally every year. In the Asian region itself, about 92% of the population is exposed to levels of air pollution that is pose significant health risks to health every year. Also, as mentioned in the previous talks, these health risks are not uniform throughout the population, making certain sectors of population like senior citizens, certain labor task force, and children more vulnerable to harmful impacts of air pollution. This highlights the need for integrated and inclusive solutions. But are the generally proposed solutions and actions really inclusive? A study on analyzing air pollution impacts and differentiated vulnerability in Southeast Asia found that research on impacts of air pollution are largely framed by a public health and medical perspective rather than a day-to-day experiences of exposed groups, leading to lack of inclusivity of exposed groups in these studies. Also, on the impacts of air pollution and employment mainly focuses on the formal labor force, while the informal labor force largely remains under-examined, particularly within the urban setting. Additionally, studies on gender and worker exposure to air pollution tends to be biased towards women and the presumptive general role, while overlooking men and ways in which gender identity intersecting with socio-economic factors determine exposure. Moving on to, to the regulatory sector, our research on analyzing air quality policies in Thailand found that general policies are largely focused on one particular sector and are implemented in silos, limiting the policy impact on the larger scale. Most of the current air quality mitigation actions in Asian countries are rather reactive than proactive. The general population is largely unaware and uninformed of the current policies and policy making practices. Moving to the citizen led actions, most of the local level citizen led actions are mainly I'm sorry, in many Asian countries are very localized and limited in impact and region, and are largely done by people that have already been impacted, which means that the damage has already been done. This highlights the need for having inclusive and integrated actions in all aspects, especially regulatory frameworks. Apart from these general trends, there are some very innovative inclusive solutions and actions that have been proposed and implemented on various levels in Southeast Asia. This session is designed to highlight just those and provide a platform for further discussion on inclusive actions. This session is designed with the objectives to familiarize the audience with the 25 clean air measures for Asia and the Pacific, to underline that the key to realizing the potential benefits for those solutions is implementation at scale, and to highlight and detail how more inclusive approaches can help implement many of those solutions at scale. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, and for that wonderful backgrounder as well for the session. And now to set the scene and provide an overview of the 25 clean air solutions, which, when implemented, will result to air quality, climate, and development co-benefits. I would like to call on Dr. Nguyen Thi Kim On of the Asian Institute of Technology. Professor Kim, as we fondly call her, has 35 years of experience working in research, education, consultancy, and capacity building, and is internationally recognized for her work on air pollution and climate in Asia. She's also a member of the science panel of the Asia Pacific Clean Air Partnership and is one of the lead authors of the 25 Clean Air Solutions Report. The floor is yours, Dr. Kim.
Thank you, Dan. So I will share my screen right now. Okay, text. Okay, can you see the screen? Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the 25 measures we call clean air measures and how it's relevant for Southeast Asian. So let's go to like a few highlights of my talk. First, following the previous section, I will talk about the exposure to air pollution and vulnerability to climate change, specifically for Southeast Asian country. Also, highlight on 25 measures by the report. We call it UNEP Solution Report, but its full report name is Air Pollution in Asia and the Pacific Sun-Based Solution. And here we call it short for report and talking a little bit about the air quality and climate co-benefit associated with implementation of 25 measures. So here are some capture of slides showing you how the sources emitting pollutant in Asia, Southeast Asia, and the combination with stagnant meteorological condition resulting in the high episode of like PM2.5 back in Bangkok in 2019 result in enhancing air quality. And then we also talk about the impact of air pollution on crops because of different pollutants have different impact on the crops and ecosystem. So Southeast Asia, we have high pollution. Firstly, we have a monsoon climate. And in dry season, when we don't have rain and a lot of open burning, the air quality getting very worse, especially the PM2.5. And here we showed here the second in 2019, the annual average of air pollution, and this is Southeast Asian region. You can see that level everywhere is in the range of 15 to 30 microgram per cubic meter, and WHO guideline right now is 5, and previous guideline is 10. Okay, so we have serious impact on human health in terms of deaths, in terms of uh, the dalis we talk about, and crop and ecosystem. In terms of deaths, so here a summary, and I remember Linda also mentioned But here I talk about in Southeast Asia, in the deaths in southern here, due to the ambient PM2.5, due to indoor air pollution, and due to ozone. And total number of deaths is almost 500,000, it means 500,000. While globally we have 6.7 million deaths in 2019. So we have intensive emission sources, like we have traffic, we have cooking with dirty fuel mentioned earlier by previous speaker, biomass urban burning, both forest fire and agricultural residue urban burning, solid waste urban burning. We have big issue with small and medium industry, which have very backward technology and very dirty. And we also rely heavily on coal for the say power generation and in big industry. I believe that in this workshop we are going to address on these emission sources. We also have transboundary pollution like region haze, acid rain, atmospheric brown cloud. So in terms of climate change, so Southeast Asia, can I see the slide? Okay. Hello, can you see my slide? Okay, Southeast Asia have high is a big emitter of pollutants and big emitter of the greenhouse gases.
Dr. Kim, sorry to interrupt. Your screen sharing stopped.
Yeah, I don't see my slide.
Can you unshare, please, and then try sharing again? Thank you.
Okay, hopefully,
There, we can see it. Thank you.
yes, not sure. It take longer time. Okay. Okay. So in terms of climate change, so Southeast Asian region is highly vulnerable to climate change because we are many countries relying mainly on agriculture and less developed, and we are in low-lying land with long coastal line, and we also prone for extreme events like typhoon reported every year. That's why we have a huge potential for co-benefit from emission control, like a co-control approach. So a few slides here show that in Hanoi, the air quality in just a few days ago, stagnant air and local and distant sources contributed, and Kuala Lumpur in September 2006 when it transboundary emission. So for the report, based on that, the report actually aimed to support efforts to reduce air pollution in Asia and the Pacific by proposing effective, cost-effective options suited for the country in the region. The report looked like that, and you can download it from the website easily. And the full report is long, but the key feature of the report, first, it highlights status of air quality in Asia and the Pacific, and it talk about that around 4 million people, or 92% of the population in the region, exposed to annual PM11 above 10 microgram per cubic meter in 2015. And it discussed benefit of reducing PM2.5 and surface ozone. In terms of health, well-being, in terms of health, well-being, so, but report also highlights that additional measure to the existing one are still required in order to improve air quality to the level that would be safeguard of our health. What can be done? And the report highlights the 25 measures that we are talking about today. And the report also highlights how to achieve the benefit, proposing the joint efforts on the regional, national, urban, and rural authority, and also enabling institution mechanism to address PM2.5 and ozone. And we also need collaborative and international initiative for financial, technological, and capacity building support. So the top 25 measures were screened from over 2,000 control measures, and that 25 measures when analyzed by model showing that it actually delivers the greatest benefits for human health while contributing to developmental priority goal, like also climate change, right? That 25 measures address emission of primary particles. That means the particle directly emitted from the sources, and when that precursor that form the particle in the ambient air, including VOC, NOx, SOx, and ammonia, and also the precursor of ozone, VOC, NOx, and CO and methane. So it turned out that the model show that when implementing that 25 measures, it can improve ambient PM2.5, and it makes that 1 billion people in Asia by 2030 would be able to breathe air with the PM2.5 less than 10 micron per cubic meter, and that would benefit for public health, economic development, and the climate. So this is the measure identified in three groups. First is convention measures. So those actually currently applied, like the road dust control, like inspection and maintenance of vehicles, and then the end of life control in the industry. The eighth measure is next stage. It means currently not implemented, like the efficiency cook stove, like ban of crop residue open burning, and 12 measures actually contributing to developmental goal. And these include, for example, the measure addressing methane emission from agriculture, from rice paddy, and also renewable energy, for example. So with these measures are listed, you can see it here, that 25 measure. I highlight here the clean cooking. As you can see right now, the already implemented is very small for the improving air quality in terms of PM2.5. And next recent realization, it means the next state also have very small potential. But the further potential, it means if we fully implemented that 25 measure, we can actually reduce PM for South Asia by 18, Southeast Asian 9, and East Asian more than 7 micrograms per cubic meter. And we, of course, have other important measures for Southeast Asian. Now, in terms of benefit, we can see here ambient PM2.5 in 2030 under current legislation. We are continuing what we are doing. Then see the dark color here where the high pollution, high PM2.5, over 100 micrograms per cubic meters. Now, if we implement that 25 measures, and in 2030, so this is a picture showing the air quality in the region. Of course, there are big urban area and also where we have dust storm, the natural source, the level is still high. In summary here, we would, if we implement that 25 measure, we can avoid, okay, premature deaths due to PM2.5 indoor and ozone by nearly 3 millions in 2030. For the crop in loss, considering four major crops for Asia, wheat, maize, rice, and soybean, we can avoid 20 million tons of in loss. And we can avoid also temperature increase by 0.3 degree and 2050. So that all, thank you all. And then the key message I want you to take is that if we implement that 25 measures, and then we can simultaneously achieve SDG goals related to health, food security, and climate change. That 25 measure solution aim to actually save millions of lives in Asia, and you can see it's 3 millions around. So clean air solutions are for healthy children, thereby safeguarding a healthy future world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. And now that we are equipped with these solutions, thanks very much to Dr. Kim's comprehensive presentation, we want to delve more on how we will be able to harness the co-benefits of these solutions and how we can use the co-innovation approach to ensure integrated and inclusive impacts. So I would like to call on Dr. Nanda Kumar Janardanan, Research Manager for Climate and Energy and the Regional Coordinator for South Asia at the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies, to introduce the co-innovation approach for air quality and climate action. Dr. Nandu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dang. Thanks a lot for introducing me. And I would also like to thank the previous speakers for setting out a good background for this presentation. Let me directly go into the presentation now. I hope you can see the presentation. Okay, so the presentation is about concept of co-innovation and co-benefits, and this is a concept which we have been working for a long time at IGES, and we thought actually this would be a very interesting information that we can share here. Uh, to start with, I would like to highlight that the global net zero initiatives could accelerate climate mitigation and also offer air quality and health core benefits. And what we have seen in the COP26 in Glasgow is that several countries have actually come forward declaring their net zero targets, and especially those countries which were earlier thought to be a bit late or a bit reluctant to promise anything on net zero. So you could see a number of countries have already come together and come forward in declaring net zero targets. So this also is sort of, if you look at several countries, at individual countries, for example, I've taken Japan here. Japan has efficient, detailed plan in terms of net zero targets, and there are about 479 local governments, including Tokyo and Kyoto and Yokohama, announced their commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So at national level, there is a 2050 target, and the same you can also see at the subnational level. And these national level as well as subnational level initiatives towards net zero will definitely will have a lot of linkages in terms of reducing emissions as well as reducing air pollution, because some of these policies which are as part of this net zero will be focusing on key sectors that are also responsible for air pollution. So there is a direct link. Now, in terms of specific actions by countries and cities, we try to track down those specific actions by some of the cities, and even again, going back to Japan for highlighting one of the examples, we have recently been working on the city of Kawasaki, and this is a research which we have been working on, which focuses on the 3R approach, triple R approach, which include response, recovery, and redesign in the context of in the context of COVID recovery background. So we try to understand what are the policies and strategies these cities are actually designing as a response to COVID and recovery from COVID, as well as the economic, the kind of situation that they have actually gone through, and how these policies can be integrated to make a long-term redesign strategy for the city, which is in tune with the national strategy. So we have worked on the city of Kawasaki, and as part of a research which is supported by UNEP, and in that, we have noticed that the key to achieving lasting reductions in both CO2 and air pollution in cities are what have been labeled as redesign, which includes not only specific policies to address air pollution or climate change, but sort of an integrated approach that includes long term strategies towards infrastructure, industries, institutions, and key sectors that are responsible for pollution as well as emissions. So the study on the Kawasaki city has been one of the interesting examples which we have recently found. And with this backdrop, I would like to go into the concept of co-innovation. And as I mentioned, co-innovation has been as a concept which IGS has been working for some time. Initially, we started working on co-innovation from the technology perspective, as an attempt to try and understand what are the alternative mechanisms for conventional technology transfer, because conventional technology transfer had a lot of limitations in terms of efficiently transferring technology and efficiently making use of the technology in the recipient country, as well as learning the experiences of the recipient countries and incorporating into technology updating. So there are a lot of limitations to conventional technology transfer on these grounds. So from these perspectives, we try to see how co-innovation can work. And we notice that co-innovation, as it defined, co-innovation is a collaborative and iterative approach to jointly innovating, manufacturing, and scaling up technologies by source and recipient countries. And we find that this same method, same approach can also be used in bringing out clean air solutions and other co-benefits. So at its core, co-innovation involves combining hardware, basically technology, and software, basically know-how and best practices from certain countries, from advanced countries to developing countries, or among countries, to maximize the potential of co-benefits. So co-innovation, from the technology perspective, one can see that co-innovation promotes sustainability, it can enhance scalability, and it also can accelerate replicability, because collaboration between two countries will help in reducing the cost of the final product or final approaches that are to be taken, and that basically ensures its scalability and replicability. And especially in terms of the 25 clean air solutions, clean air measures that has already been discussed by previous speakers. And we found that quite a lot of examples of collaboration between Japan and other countries are already existing. And these examples are sort of sharing knowledge and technologies across Asian countries. These examples are basically sort of highlighting how knowledge and technologies are shared across Asian cities. And a few examples I mentioned here. One is Japan's collaboration with India, especially on the transportation sector. And Japan has been supporting India on developing a metro rail network, which has substantially reduced CO2 emissions originally coming out from the transportation sector. And it also has positive impacts on the air pollution trajectory in the country. And similarly, there's another example which we have studied is a concept of Takakura composting, which is basically a home-based composting method that has been developed in Japan. And the emissions originally coming out of composting, and how actually residential waste burning used to be done earlier, and how this could be controlled. So all these advantages actually are offered by this Takakura composting. And we have seen that this methodology has been utilized in jointly developing a better composting method in Indonesia and some other countries in Southeast Asian region. Similarly, Japan's learning and Japan's approaches towards diesel emission reduction are some of the best practices. Certain countries are trying to follow it, but this can actually be followed at a larger scale in future. And just as co-innovation help us achieve co-benefits, the delivery of co-benefits can in turn strengthen co-innovation process. So as co-innovation, as basically jointly developing, jointly innovating and developing ideas and better solutions, will definitely have core benefits, will basically sort of accelerate core benefit. And once an approach will offer core benefit, that in turn again incentivizes, or it basically promotes co-innovation. So this particular slide is a point where we wanted to highlight that these co-innovation and co-benefits are mutually reinforcing. And just an additional information I wanted to share here is that the research work on core benefits and how these are actually progressing, we notice that there are significant progress in terms of the research and publication research articles that have been coming out focusing on core benefits. And there have been a notable increase, but most of this focus on quantifying the magnitude of potential benefits without analyzing the process through which those benefits will be achieved. So there is there's hence a need to bridge the gap between the modeling of benefits and how to implement the actions that can achieve them. This is just an additional information we want to share here. And just with sharing the latest some information from the Asian Co-Benefits Partnership, I would like to I would like to conclude my presentation here. Just as I concluded my presentation, and now I have another additional task here to invite Dr. Supat uh, to uh, to join the discussion. I hope Dr. Supat is here. Okay, let me briefly introduce Dr. Supat. And uh, Dr. Supat Wang Watana is affiliated with the Faculty of Public Health, Thammasat University, as a senior specialist in the air pollution since 2017. He also serves as a senior advisor to the Thailand Environment Institute. Before that, he served as a director. Before he served in the Royal Thai government for more than 30 years. He was the Director General of Pollution Control Department for 5 years, in charge of the management of air quality, water quality, solid waste, hazardous waste, and chemicals as well as environmental law enforcement. So I would like to invite Dr. Supat, and I would like to hear from his views on how we can concretize the co-innovation approaches into practice. And in order to, I would like to say that there are two questions I specifically want to have Dr. Supat's view. And I would first welcome Dr. Supat, and I would go into the questions. Supat, Dr. Supat is welcome, and hope you can hear me clearly. Dr. Supat, can you hear me clearly? Dr. Supat, it seems you are muted. Can you hear
Yes,
me now?
yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much, Dr. Nanda, for the introduction. I'm trying to find the microphone. Sorry for that.
So thank you so much, Dr. Supat, for joining this session. And as I mentioned, we would like to hear your views on how we can concretize co-innovation approach into practice. And in order to have your views in a more systematic way, I would like to ask you two specific questions. And the first question is that what would be the role of different social groups in implementing these solutions?
Yeah, on this question, I think I view this social group, I divide it into four social groups to be involved. The first is the government group, consisting of various government agencies involved in both air quality and climate change. And the role of the government group is for developing the plan and the implementation of the plan. I think that's the major role of the government. And the second social group, I view it as the academia, university, and researcher. These are the group who will actually provide scientific information, uh, which will be used as a basis for selecting the measures, setting up the policies and the measures to be implemented. If we don't have the scientific information, we might go through the wrong way. For example, if the major source of the PM 2.5, we don't know the major source, we might select measure which address the wrong sources, and it might not give out the effective result. That's the role of the academia, who will produce scientific information. And the third social group will be the private sector. And those are the people or the group which will actually do the emitting pollutant and emitting greenhouse gases into the air and so on. So they have a very important role in terms of to reduce the emission of those air pollutant and greenhouse gases. So this also the other group, and their role will be emission reduction. And the final group, which is probably the most important group, that's the civil society group, the people. They are both the one who receive the impact from pollution and also receive the impact from the climate change. Uh, and at the same time, the people also being the emitter as well, because on their daily life, they do a lot of activity. They drive the car, and also they do the agriculture uh, uh, practice, and then practice open burning, and those are the thing that they also being an emitter of air pollutant and also greenhouse gases. But again, they are the one who will receive the impact, the general people. So the role of this group not only to reduce emission that they are doing, but also they will be an important group. It is an important group to drive the policies. A lot of non-governmental organization been developed and been formed in order to drive the other social group to take their action. For example, the government to do the planning, to do the implementation, put pressure onto the government, and also to drive the private sector to reduce emission of air pollutant and greenhouse gases. And they also part of the academia as well, because we have to learn from the community, from the civil society. So these are the four different social groups that I see to be involved in the solution on air quality and climate change, and they have to be included in the process. Included in the process.
Thank you, Dr. Supat, for that important, that very valuable input from you, and highlighting the role of these four different social groups, and also highlighting the interlinkages of their importance. I have one more question to you, and this is about what are the mechanisms cities can employ to ensure that key groups are included in the decision making process that would support implementation of solutions.
I think in terms of the city management will have the role to develop the plan. What we called it something like clean air action plan, and we have to take all different social groups to be involved in the development of the plan from the beginning. And the process will involve many meetings focus group meeting with different social groups, focus group meeting with the academia in order to receive information and also tell the need to the university what kind of information the city would like to get, scientific information. And then at the same time, the researcher at the university will then provide information to the city for the decision making. And focus group meeting with the private sector as well, because they are the one who will be impacted on the measures, mitigation measures. They will be subject to the emission reduction, and that their important role. So we have to make sure that they understand what is the impact of the air pollution and climate change, and try to I would say educate the private sector that they need to do something. If otherwise, they will also be affected as well. So focus group meeting with them, and again the focus group meeting with the civil society that we need to hear from the people. What do they need? What kind of impact do they receive, and also whether it is possible, if they are the emitter of air pollutant and greenhouse gases, what can they do? What they can do in order to reduce emission that they produce, and we have to understand as well that the people sometimes uh, has no capability to reduce the emission by themselves, then what kind of support that they need, something like that. And the focus group among meeting among the government sector, government agency, because each government agency will have different role. For example, industrial sector, we will have to be involve the Minister of Industries, yeah, the health effect from air pollution or climate change. We have to involve, bring the Ministry of Public Health to be involved. So this kind of meeting among relevant government agencies to make sure that they understand what they have to do, uh, what kind of rules, what kind of measures that they have to implement, and so on. So after we get all information from focus group meeting, then the government agency who are responsible to develop the plan, or the cities, will then have to consolidate all the views and comments and suggestions from different social groups together, and then come up with a clean air action plan or implementation plan to be implemented. But we have to get the acceptance also from all social groups. So we probably will have to hold a panel of different social groups, government, private sector, civil society, and the academia at the same time. A very big flaw to look at the plan, whether the plan is feasible, can be implemented, and if the plan is accepted by all different social groups or different stakeholders, then we are probably certain at a certain level that this plan can be implemented with success. And then we will then go ahead and implement the plan. And after the implementation, again, we will have to bring all the different social group, all stakeholder to come back and review the result, whether we have achieved the indicator and targets that we have set in the plan. If not, what can be adjusted, what has to be modified in order to meet the target. So that a kind of process that we have to go through from the beginning until the end, until the end, and the information will have to be shared among different social groups. So this is the process that I think will actually make the plan successful. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Supat, for highlighting an actionable agenda and how we can involve all these social groups, and especially the point about your point about encouraging their participation in all possible ways, and also sort of trying to follow it up. Probably some sort of monitoring and verification in a way that also is sort of a very valuable input. So I would like to thank Dr. Supat for your participation, your time with us, and your valuable inputs. So with that, I
Thank you.
would close this session, and let me move to the next session where I would invite I would like to invite K. Paddu, Associate Program Officer of the United Nations Environment Program Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. K coordinates the Asia Pacific Clean Air Partnership, APCAP, a regional partnership working to achieve measurable reductions in air pollution emissions in Asia Pacific. She has over 10 years of experience working on air quality issues in the region. Prior to joining UNEP, Kay worked with Clean Air Asia, helping develop air quality action plans and addressing the status of air pollution in the region. Kay, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Nandu, for the kind introduction. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It's such a pleasure to join you today. And on behalf of UNEP, we want to thank the organizers for this opportunity to join you for this very important event. So we have already heard, I think, from the speakers today how women are particularly affected by air pollution due to structural and biological factors, including lower wages, and lack of decent jobs, motherhood, traditional gender roles, and cultural norms. And we have also seen how air pollution affects a child's development, learning, and overall well being, and some of these with potential effects that they could feel throughout their entire lifetime. So, for this panel, we will be hearing how these traditional gender roles and cultural norms can create inequalities and make certain segments of our society more vulnerable to the impacts of air pollution and climate change. We'll also hear about the roles of women, youth, and local communities and opportunities for them to lead efforts on air quality and climate action. So let me now introduce our esteemed panel. Our first speaker is Ms. Susan Nisperos Nul, who is the officer in charge, Division Chief of the Climate Change Service at the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in the Philippines. Very nice to meet you, Ms. Susan, and thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Kay.
Thank you. Up next is the Senior Youth Project Coordinator at the Asian Development Bank Youth for Asia. Thank you for joining us, Mr. William Lucht. Hi, William. I think it's being brought up screen there.
Nice
Hi.
to be here.
We also have the head of division of the Government Planning and Human Development under the Regional Development Planning Agency, BAPIDA, of Bogor City in Indonesia. Let's welcome Ms. Risna Widyastuti. Hello, Ibu Risna. And finally, we have Ms. Cherry Barnuevo, the Secretary General of the Solidarity of Oppressed Filipino People, who will be joining us through a recorded message. So thank you very much to our dear panelists for being here with us today. So let's start our conversation with Ms. Susan from DNR. So Ms. Susan, can you share with us how can socially constructed gender norms, disabilities, and other inequalities exacerbate the negative impacts that we already feel from air pollution and climate change? And the second question is, I have personally seen many strong women leaders in DNR, especially within the air quality and climate space. Could you share with us what roles have women taken in DNR's programs that leverage on their experience? So, Miss Susan, over to you.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Kay. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start. In many cases, gender inequality means that women are more vulnerable to the negative effects of air pollution and climate change. This is mainly due to gender roles, particularly in the developing countries like the Philippines, where women are considered as often dependent on the natural environment for sustenance and income. This claim is no longer new, but allow me to get back to the findings of previous studies. Okay.
Hi, Miss
Being a
Susan.
male, yes.
I think you can have your presentation in slideshow so that we can see it in full screen.
Yeah, I think okay. My presentation is in slideshow.
Yeah, maybe we could just try again, just one more
Okay,
time.
sure.
Thank you.
Can you see it in the slideshow?
I not yet. I think we can just see individual, but I think you still need to click on the slideshow to present it full screen.
Sorry for the delay.
No worries.
I should have checked this earlier. Anyway, can you see it now?
I think it's still so we can see
It's
the notes section of the PPT. Maybe we can try just one more time, and then maybe we could just proceed um, if if we still have some technical issues because we can hear you very well. Thank you. Okay, so now we can see the full screen. Thanks very much.
okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Kay. Being where is okay. Okay. Being a male or a female can create inequalities in the experience of negative impacts from air pollution and climate change through accessibility, opportunity, and exposure to risks and hazards. I will share with you this afternoon key points from the reference I use on how gender can create inequalities, especially during disasters. Air pollution impacts on the health of both women and men. My presentation dwells more on inequalities seen when disasters occur as caused by climate change. Okay. This afternoon, let's have a quick review on the cause and effect of inequality, including gender issues. And this shall be presented briefly through a review uh, on gender equality in disaster risk reduction and management. Okay, and this shall be followed with an enumeration of manifestation of gender-based discrimination in the Philippines and how are these concerns addressed through our policies, plans, and programs. Gender equality is influenced by gender relations when activities in households, formal and informal institutions, and the market interact. Okay, the World Development Report on Gender Equality in 2012 defined gender equality by three components. Endowments, these are the material and non-material resources that the individual has on hand. Economic opportunities, these are the avenues where individuals can translate their endowments and time into income or more resources. And of course, the agency, the ability of the individual to make decisions for oneself. Okay. Any imbalance or absence, oh, sorry. Any imbalance or absence of one of the three components, of course, that would mean inequality. Let's check how disasters affect a gender. So disasters amplify or increase existing inequalities and disrupt the functioning of households and community, hence affecting social relation. When disaster occurs, it is the women more than men being disadvantaged as they are considered more vulnerable and less resilient. Let's see what are the issues on disaster preparedness. Timely access to information is a critical factor when disaster occurs. When disasters struck these countries, Bangladesh, Nargis, Myanmar, and the rest, about 60 to 90% of the victims were women. And another issue is we all know that mobility is also an issue as there are areas where women's mobility is restricted to their homes and therefore they are not able to receive on-time community uh, announcements. Okay. Child caring, other issues on this disaster response. Child caring responsibilities, sexual violence. Even young girls are forced to marry older men to cope with the impact of disasters, lack of privacy, and women struggling to work doubly on food sourcing and preparation, including care of children and sick elderly, with meager resources. These are concerns that need to be responded, and not to mention their mental well being while attending these burdens. Okay. Another issues on disaster response include uh, high mortality rates, and women are less likely to be able to on skills on life skills. Women has almost nil life skills such as swimming, and during disasters or flooding they are not able to run fast and climb trees on high locations. Okay. uh, There are also cases where gender politics in the household place the male members as priority over women and girls. These are considered also one of the issues during disaster response. Uh, Male members are being prioritized. Relief aid are almost never adequate, and there are discriminatory laws or practices being experienced. Also, uh, during rehabilitation and recovery, women are very at the disadvantaged stage since they are in charge in taking care of children and even elderly and sick, and they cannot of course do what they are supposed to do as to help or to contribute in the processes on rehabilitation and recovery. Women are also more prone to post-disaster diseases, and they do heavier work as family care provider with significantly smaller resources. Okay. During rehabilitation and recovery, security, okay. Many women, especially rural women, do not have savings. They also are excluded from rehabilitation programs, which prioritizes male as heads of households. Other issues on rehabilitation and recovery are on lack of information about available welfare programs. And it is always men that has been called upon to avail of welfare programs during rehabilitation and recovery. Older women are also at a disadvantage because of lack of income sources. And some of them take care also of their grandchildren while their parents are away. Another issue that is worth noticeable is the limited mobility of women with disabilities. They are at risk because their access to much needed support services are not available. Okay. Still on issues on rehabilitation and recovery. Uh, increase of housework, particularly the longer time needed to get water, has led many schoolgirls drop out of school. And during disasters, due to damage wrought by disasters, girls have to walk farther and longer to get to school because maybe roads have been destroyed, transportations are not available. And this has implications to their personal security. There are also gender-based discrimination against men and LGBTs, or the lesbians, gays, bisexual, and transgenders. Okay. Gender stereotypes of males as protector also resulted in the high number of deaths of men due to their risk-taking behavior in disaster rescue and post-disaster cleanups. But there was a shift on how we look at responses during rehabilitation and recovery. Uh, Usually, interventions are focused on women and children, and we overlook the needs of men. So this is now the where the shift has brought us because of the interventions we have. Counseling and other support for widowed men have to cope earning a living is also neglected. Okay, those are other issues now also lodged on men. Women with disabilities are also a gender issue during rehabilitation and recovery because they are subject to higher rates of sexual violence and may increase during the post-disaster period. Okay. The Philippines is not spared on gender issues. There are manifestations of gender based discriminations on economic opportunities, as women are still poorest groups in the country. Uh, Endowment, as women still do not fully enjoy equal access and ownership of resources. And on agency, as still women are still underrepresented in public offices. The Philippines responds to these gender concerns through compliance with international agreements like the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, where priorities of action have been laid down. Okay. It requires gender disaggregated vulnerability and capacity assessments for countries to come up with measures taken to address gender based issues in recovery. It requires post disaster needs assessment methodologies, which include guidance on gender aspects. It requires contingency plans with gender sensitivities and dedicated provision for women in relief, shelter, and emergency medical facilities. Okay. The Philippines responds also through their own policies like the Magna Carta of Women, uh, which ensures protection of women from gender violence, and also uh, they are ensure the provision of services during disasters. The Philippines also has the Climate Change Act that recognizes the vulnerability of women to the arising concerns, hazards, and risks from climate change. The country has also National Climate Change Action Plan to build and ensures that the adaptive capacities of women and men in communities are achieved, and they should be resilient also to the recent hazards that the climate change could bring. And of course, the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, uh, where it ensures that gender analysis should be post-disaster and early recovery needs assessments. Gender concerns should be uh, uh, considered during disaster risk reduction interventions. Okay. Okay. How gender can create inequalities with all the interventions like policies, programs, and gender related activities that's supposed to break the inequalities. As stated in the previous studies discussed, we now see a shift or change in the way we address gender inequalities. People are now so sensitive to the needs of women during disasters. But it is also noticeable that psychosocial interventions in disasters focus only on women and children and overlook the needs of men. With this, gender is still creating inequalities, and there is more to be done as we need to stop buying the myth into the myth about gender equality because it isn't a reality yet. Gender equality is still a struggle. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Miss Susan. And we're actually hoping to hear a bit more later during the Q and A. And from your presentation, it's very clear that there are a wide range of issues and challenges that women face, especially during disasters. And of course, these inequalities may even worsen with the potential increase of climate-related disasters due to rising temperatures that we are experiencing at the moment. It's very, I think, encouraging to see existing international and national frameworks in place. And we hope to hear more potentially during the Q&A on how these frameworks are being implemented on the ground. I think that's also something the participants are very keen to hear about, and hopefully we'll have some time to do that later. So let me now turn to William from ADB Youth for Asia. So William, could you share with us what are the roles that young people have taken in ADB's air quality and climate projects that leverage from their experience? And if you could also share how we could create enabling environments and safe spaces for young people to continue to create an impact to protect our climate and also bring back clean air for all. William,
Sure.
over to you.
Thank you very much, Kay. I appreciate it. And thank you for all the wonderful speakers and as well as the reports that have been very informative. So, I guess first I wanted to start with a statistic. First, we must recognize that there are over 2 billion individuals under the age of 30 living in Asia and Pacific, and that represents 54% of the global youth population. And it is important, of course, then, to incorporate this population into project design, project work, and of course also to recognize some of the issues that they face. And talking about those issues, and thank you, Dr. Kim, for bringing some of those up in your earlier presentation. For example, air pollution really impacts children and youth. In 2016, WHO estimated that 600,000 children died from acute lower respiratory infections caused by air pollution. And incidences of respiratory diseases in Ulaanbaatar have increased 2.7 sorry 2.7 fold in the last 10 years with children living in highly polluted districts of central Ulaanbaatar found to have 40% less lung function than children living in rural areas. And that is not to mention also potential mental and psychosocial effects that air pollution must have. And combine this with the fact that young people also often have a higher barrier of entry to meaningfully contributing to climate action and meaningful development. So, oftentimes, they might face social economic barriers. And with COVID, young people that do not have access to technological hardware or have less access to internet are particularly constrained. So how how can we create safe spaces? How can we change these issues um, and change them into potential opportunities for young people? First, I think we must recognize the strengths that youth have. And of course, we must also recognize that youth is not a homogenous group. It is heterogeneous. But generally, youth strengths may be classified under 6 categories: youth resilience and resourcefulness, disruptive and innovative thinking, caring, responsible citizens, digital skills, natural collaborators, and great at building behavioral insights, especially with regard to peers and other communities. And kind of boiling down into those, young people, first moving on to resilience, young people often overcome resource constraints through creative way of approaching challenges. Studies show, for example, that when faced with challenges in acquiring resources for development work, young people often have heightened awareness for social cultural contexts and limitations and think of innovative ways to deliver the most impact for what's available to them. Young, in the next regard to innovative thinking, youth identify new approaches to older problems. The combination of resourcefulness, innovative thinking, and empathy for others generates new ideas. ADB's research with UNESCO and UND emphasized the central role that young social innovators can play in the next generation of development solutions, including air pollution. Also, recent studies have shown that young people are connected and caring, responsible citizens. Um, those with access to technology and opportunity are often knowledgeable about global affairs and the state of the planet, and are more prepared and determined, either as individuals or collectively, to contribute to a better world and delivery of SDGs. And of course, the stereotype is that young people are very tech savvy. Um, so use the natural fascination or interest in technology coincides with the rapid development of ICT in all corners of our lives and in the development world. Evidence shows that youth-driven components to development initiatives improve the delivery of positive outcomes. Um, Even considering today's youth are digital natives, it still remains important, though, to focus on building digital skills amongst a marginalized youth to overcome the digital divide. And going to the natural collaborators aspect, young people typically place an importance on collective approaches such as networking, building alliances, including across generations, so not just on youth alone. And that allows them to overcome cultural and socio political barriers, uh, driven often by the desire to improve community conditions. And finally, we should leverage the youth strengths to build on their open mindedness and to build on their insights into their own communities. Young people are able to build trust with communities and derive deep insights, and they can use that to influence and educate their peers, parents, communities, and supporting and forming project outcomes. So, given the stakes of youth growing up in polluted cities and areas, and what potential strengths that they have, uh, what can they do to um, combat air pollution and inspire great climate action? So, they can embrace both conventional and unconventional methods. Through social media and other online interactions, for instance, youth are already sharing knowledge and starting discussions to ultimately mobilize their peers toward the achievement of SDGs. One example of this is the youth led NGO Bye Bye Plastic Bags, which aims to make the island of Bali in Indonesia plastic bag free. And with the help of young people who participated in awareness campaigns and beach cleanups, Bali became the first Indonesian province to implement a province wide ban on single use plastic bags, straws, and polyester in June 2019. Education is also a key component. Young people can encourage students through school extracurricular activities, educational assistance, clubs, networks, and other collaborative environments to help them understand the meaning of air quality indicators, early recognition of respiratory diseases amongst peers, as well as for them to understand uh, different impacts of air pollution and ways that we and them on an individual basis can combat the effects of air pollution and to reduce it on an individual level. Um, this can help motivate behavioral change, including switching to public transport, as well as switching to potentially using better, cleaner technology and fuels. Because, of course, influencing the children and youth at school isn't just influencing children and youth. It's influencing their whole network. As natural collaborators, youth will tell, okay, my parents, my mom, my dad, my sister, my brothers, all about what they learned. So that it can create a cascading effect. And we can see that in several projects that ADB has done with regard to youth, um, where the cascading effects of youth creates a sensation for behavioral change. And another last aspect that we can youth that can be used to create a effective part for youth is youth involvement and advancement of technology. For instance, smartphone app development has been quite beneficial for air quality management, and supporting it has supported low cost air quality monitoring, as well as smartphone apps can report on air quality levels in cities, send recommendations for users, and on wearing N95 masks. So, utilizing youth skills and technology can be used to develop educational behavioral change as well as actionable steps so that we may create a more healthy and a less polluted Asia and the Pacific. Um, Finally, I think as a general rule, institutions should invite youth to co-design, co-lead, and participate in spaces regarding to climate action and air pollution. It's important to have a young voice in there, to see what insights they may bring from their community and networks, because they're oftentimes very passionate about these subjects, and also, of course, to put the money where the mouth is. Right, we can't just talk about youth inclusion, but we actually need to act on it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, William, and I think very strong messages. I think one of the main points from your intervention that I really liked is really on meaningful engagement of the youth, to identify specific opportunities and make sure that they are engaged, because not just highlighting, I think, the impacts that young people have, but how we can engage them in a more meaningful way. And I think the strengths of the youth that you have identified is very important as we discuss about this concept of co-innovation. And we're hoping to be able to identify some of these opportunities to be able to do that. Maybe if I could just quickly add, because we're talking about this clean air solutions that we have developed together with many partners here. Just this year, we've actually tried to incorporate a child-centric element of our clean air solutions, and we launched it last month. We called it the child-centered clean air solutions, highlighting what specific impacts these measures have for children, benefits they have for children, and how we can really engage youth, young people, children in these types of action, and hoping to be able to continue this discussion. Thank you, William. Let's let me now invite our local government panelists from Indonesia, Ibu Risna Widyastuti. Ibu Risna, could you kindly share with us Bogor's current and planned strategies on gender mainstreaming, women and youth empowerment in various sectors in Bogor? Ibu Risna, you could unmute, and over to you.
Okay. Hello. Thank you very much, Ms. Kay. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. It is great and an honor for me to participate in this panel. Please allow me to present this session in Bahasa. It's okay? Thank you. Okay. Slide, please. Slide. I mean. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Oke, Bapak Ibu, terima kasih atas kesempatannya. Kami dari pemerintah Kota Bogor tentu bersenang hati untuk bisa memberikan sedikit sharing dalam beberapa menit ke depan. Di antaranya adalah bahwa isu gender dan kualitas air dan udara ini betapa sangat penting bagi kita semua, khususnya adalah wanita dan anak-anak ya. Gender. Untuk itu kami tentunya memahami ini sebagai aparatur sipil negara atau yang bergerak di bidang pemerintahan daerah memiliki tugas untuk sebagai regulator, dinamisator, fasilitator dan katalisator. Jadi ini kami ditantang tentunya dan diharapkan untuk mampu mengadministrasikan permasalahan pembangunan daerah dalam kebijakan strategis dan operasional untuk mewujudkan target pembangunan daerah. Kota Bogor memiliki RPJMD atau Rencana Pembangunan Jangka Menengah Daerah pada tahun 2019 sampai dengan 2024. Di antaranya kami memiliki misi untuk mewujudkan Kota Bogor yang lebih sehat. Ini tentunya angka harapan hidup bagian dari indeks pembangunan manusia ini menjadi tujuan pertama, dan tentunya tujuan kedua dan ketiga adalah upaya kita secara operasional melalui intervensi program dan kegiatan pada perangkat daerah meningkatkan indeks kualitas air dan kualitas udara. Ini dapat diterjemahkan ke dalam beberapa sasaran, di mana indikator ini sangat penting untuk kita bisa menjadi dashboard pencapaian program pembangunan daerah. Next, please. Oke. Ini merupakan visi Kota Bogor, di mana Kota Bogor memiliki visi mewujudkan Kota Bogor sebagai kota yang ramah keluarga. Ini artinya keluarga menjadi fokus utama untuk di mana faktor-faktor kualitas daya dukung dan daya dukung untuk hidup menjadi perhatian dari pemerintah Kota Bogor. Dari semua aspek tentunya tadi yang telah disampaikan di awal bahwa fokus pembangunan manusia dan indeks peningkatan kualitas air dan udara ini menjadi bagian dari upaya peningkatan target pembangunan daerah. Dari visi Kota Bogor mewujudkan kota yang ramah keluarga diterjemahkan lagi menjadi Kota Bogor yang mewujudkan Kota Bogor yang lebih sehat, menjadi Kota Bogor yang lebih sejahtera dan Kota Bogor yang lebih cerdas. Ini merupakan misi sampai dengan 2024 dan berharap kami bisa mencapainya meskipun terjadi gelombang pandemi yang juga menghantam Indonesia, khususnya epicentrum yang terdapat di daerah Jawa di bagian barat, ini Jakarta, Jabodetabek ya, Jakarta, Bogor, Tangerang, Bekasi, tidak terkecuali Bogor. Terkenal, alhamdulillah kami sekarang saat ini dalam posisi level 1 dan pelaksanaan kehidupan ekonomi dan beberapa pelaksanaan forum-forum dialog juga bisa akhirnya menjadi tatap muka. Sedikit highlight aspek regulasi yang menjadi aspek daya saing daerah Kota Bogor. Kami tentu ingin sekali menyampaikan bahwa dan bersenang hati bahwa Kota Bogor secara gender atau aspek gender ini telah memiliki peraturan daerah Kota Bogor nomor 3 tahun 2017 tentang penyelenggaraan kota layak anak. Yang kedua yaitu Kota Bogor telah memiliki kawasan tanpa rokok atau smoke free policy untuk Perda nomor 10 tahun 2018 dan dilanjutkan dengan peraturan wali kota untuk petunjuk teknis dari smoke free policy tersebut. Yang keempat, ada juga peraturan wali kota Bogor tentang gerakan masyarakat hidup sehat di kota Bogor atau di Healthy Life Society Movement. Ini merupakan kampanye untuk meningkatkan kualitas hidup masyarakat melalui berbagai level di masyarakat hingga instansi pemerintah daerah. Yang kelima yaitu peraturan wali kota tentang pemberian air susu ibu eksklusif atau exclusive breastfeeding. Yang keenam ini terdapat peraturan wali kota nomor 61 tahun 2018 tentang pengurangan penggunaan kantong plastik. Ini merupakan support dan komitmen dari pemerintah Kota Bogor untuk mengurangi limbah, tentunya bertahap juga ikut meningkatkan kualitas air dan udara kita di Kota Bogor khususnya. Yang terakhir ini kami juga bahkan sampai dengan pojok ASI pun kami diatur demikian untuk bagaimana para ibu jika di kantor itu bisa nyaman untuk bisa menyusui atau mempompa ASI di ruangan khusus demikian. Next slide. Nah, pada kesempatan kali ini kami tentunya ingin menyampaikan menyampaikan bahwa terdapat beberapa komunitas gender yang bisa bersama-sama Kota Bogor membangun kehidupan yang lebih baik untuk kota yang lebih sehat dan kota yang lebih ramah keluarga. Kami mengidentifikasi beberapa dari banyak list yang kami susun, tapi kami sedikit saja 5 yang akan kami perkenalkan pada kesempatan siang hari ini, yaitu PKK atau Family Welfare Movement, di mana PKK ini merupakan gerakan nasional mulai dari nasional, provinsi, daerah hingga di tingkat wilayah kelurahan. Ini diketuai oleh istri dari para pamong atau para pimpinan daerah. Jadi ini merupakan support dan merupakan tim penggerak yang akan menggerakkan masyarakat, memberikan sosialisasi, edukasi dan sekaligus kampanye untuk berbagai program yang berada padanya. Yang kedua, Forum Kota Sehat ini merupakan bentukan juga dari pemerintah, di mana dia juga dalam rangka memberdayakan kota yang lebih sehat dengan tatanan-tatanan kota sehatnya. Yang ketiga yang baru saja kami miliki dan berbangga hati, kami memiliki Forum Anak Daerah. Forum Anak Daerah ini secara gender mereka akan menyuarakan hak-hak anak yang kemudian akan kita terjemahkan ke dalam bahasa program kegiatan pada perangkat daerah hingga dapat mengintervensi berbagai permasalahan pembangunan. Ini salah satu contoh yang dapat kita lihat di sebelah kanan dari paparan adalah The Declaration of Stop Smoking from Local Children's Forum. Ini baru saja berlangsung sekitar seminggu yang lalu. Di sana deklarasi untuk tidak merokok. Selanjutnya ini merupakan salah satu contoh bahwa yes, lanjut next slide, it's okay. Ya, ini salah satunya merupakan gerakan, tentunya kesadaran yang didasari atas permasalahan dan ingin keluar sekali dari solusi, ingin keluar dari permasalahan dan mencari solusi bersama tentunya. Ini yang akan kami sampaikan ada beberapa, yaitu yang pertama adalah hatinya PKK atau gerakan halaman asri teratur indah dan nyaman. Ini merupakan salah satu program pokok PKK. Dari sekian program, memang terdapat beberapa program yang menyentuh lingkungan. Dari segi tema, hatinya PKK ini membawakan semangat untuk bisa memanfaatkan lahan pekarangan sekecil apapun di dalam rumah untuk dijadikan sebagai fungsi penataan kawasan hijau yang baik, atau mungkin fungsi juga untuk meningkatkan kualitas gizi melalui sayuran-sayuran yang ditanam secara mandiri. Ini yang kedua, gender champion. Gender Champion ini juga merupakan program daripada pemberdayaan perempuan dan perlindungan anak. Pada tahun 2020 kami boleh berbangga hati Gender Champion Kota Bogor Miss Alin itu mendapatkan penghargaan dikarenakan berhasil untuk membangun komunitas dan memberdayakan lingkungan sekitar dengan jenis 3R atau reuse, reduce, recycle. Dan pada beberapa item justru sampai dengan saat ini telah mencapai hampir 800 juta per tahun untuk omsetnya. Ini berjalan mulai dari tahun 2009 sampai dengan 2020 ini makin berkembang baik dari segi item handicraftnya ataupun dari segi luasan untuk marketnya di dalam dan luar negeri. Peran pemerintah pada Gender Champion ini tentunya memberikan edukasi, pelatihan untuk bisa ekspor ke luar negeri dan tentunya untuk terus dipantau oleh perangkat daerah terkait. Yang ketiga yaitu environment atau community. Ini merupakan juga bentukan dari bekerjasama dengan IPB. Perlu kami sampaikan di Kota Bogor ini terdapat banyak sekali universitas dan sangat baik sekali kolaborasi itu dilaksanakan, salah satunya dengan IPB. Masih berupa aktivitas untuk memanfaatkan memanfaatkan limbah-limbah domestik rumah tangga. Dapat kita lihat di sana peran perempuan sangat besar sekali. Dan hampir 99%-nya merupakan perempuan yang terdiri dari ibu rumah tangga, pemilik toko hingga lingkungan sekitar yang terdekat di daerah tersebut. Ini selanjutnya Bogor Hejo. Bogor Hejo juga merupakan program pokok PKK di mana semangatnya untuk lebih memiliki lingkungan yang asri dan meningkatkan pola hidup bersih dan sehat. Next slide, please. Ya, nah ini juga beberapa contoh dari Basiba atau kontribusi untuk lingkungan, di mana ini merupakan bank sampah bentukan dari Dharma Wanita, di mana Dharma Wanita ini tentunya memiliki peran yang sangat besar untuk bisa membawakan dan menggerakkan penyelesaian permasalahan lingkungan. Ini sama juga merupakan upaya untuk bagaimana sampah ini dikelola ke dalam satu unit bank sampah, kemudian diolah dan kemudian dipisahkan dan kemudian dijadikan satu nilai ekonomi yang lebih bermanfaat. Ini yang kemudian multifunction posyandu ini baru saja hangat pada tahun 2021 sekarang. Di bulan ini posyandu Anggrek RW 5 ini merupakan posyandu yang selain tentunya posyandu ini ada pos pelayanan terpadu yang menjadi sentral untuk meningkatkan derajat kesehatan masyarakat, tapi juga posyandu multifungsi ini meningkatkan statusnya tidak hanya derajat kesehatan masyarakat, tapi ikut juga membawakan upaya untuk lebih meningkatkan lingkungan yang bersih dan upaya untuk pemenuhan hak anak dan melindungi hak-hak anak. Ini yang kemudian ini ada juga KWT dari Berkah Kelurahan, KWT Berkah di Kelurahan Sindang Rasa. Ini ada sebuah kelurahan bernama Sindang Rasa. Di sana kelompok wanita taninya dan semangat Bogor berkebunnya dibantu dan Forum Kota Sehat memanfaatkan limbah-limbah rumah tangga untuk dijadikan satu formula pupuk untuk kemudian diputarkan kembali menjadi pupuk untuk menanam sayuran di sekitar pengarangan rumah. Next slide. Ya, ini kami juga berbangga hati, bersenang hati bahwa kita juga memiliki mobile health counseling service. Itu di sana untuk konsultasi nutrisi, deteksi dini untuk penyakit HIV, dan tentunya termasuk juga konseling untuk stop dari merokok. Ini yang kemudian ada juga kampung besek. Besek ini diadopsi dari bahasa Sunda, bebersih saserea pikeun kesehatan. Ini merupakan juga salah satu hasil dari gerakan hidup masyarakat. Di sana masyarakatnya berdeklarasi dan berkomitmen untuk hidup lebih sehat. Di antaranya salah satunya indikator berhenti merokok, ada komunitas berhenti merokok, stop perkawinan anak, hingga akhirnya nanti melahirkan kualitas generasi penerus yang lebih baik, tidak stunting. Itu salah satu isu permasalahan di pembangunan manusia di Kota Bogor. Jadi cukup umur untuk menikah dan secara mental dan psikologi udah siap menjadi orang tua. Jadi itu merupakan salah satu upaya untuk meningkatkan kesehatan dan kualitas hidup masyarakat. Ini yang terakhir ada Declaration of Plastic Smart City. Ini baru juga telah ditandatangani juga. Dan pada saat ini kami sedang melakukan scoping study atau elaborasi lebih lanjut mengenai permasalahan data untuk melengkapi kajian. Next slide. Nah, ini merupakan lokasi kampung yang bisa dibilang mulai dari yang terkecil ingin membangun keluarga, tentunya adalah dari kelompok terkecil masyarakat, yaitu keluarganya, dan lingkungan pemerintah yang terkecil tentunya di kelurahan. Untuk itu beberapa kelurahan di Kota Bogor diberikan keluasaan inovasi, baik itu dari mengangkat dari permasalahan maupun dari potensi yang dimiliki masing-masing untuk bisa menjadi memiliki daya saing dan kekhasan masing-masing daerah dengan menjaga kekhasan masing-masing daerah. Ini diantaranya terdapat modal sosial dari yang pertama dari Sindang Sari, di mana aktor sosial dan tentunya ada satu bibit potensi untuk dikembangkan. Pada tahun 2021 ini dikembangkan untuk khas perca, memanfaatkan potongan-potongan perca atau potongan-potongan kain untuk dijadikan beberapa barang yang lebih bernilai guna. Misalnya masker dan beberapa peralatan rumah tangga. Ini yang kedua, Kampung Germas. Tadi salah satunya adalah Kampung Besek. Kampung Germas ini juga terdapat di beberapa lokasi. Sampai dengan tahun 2021 ini Kampung Germas sudah mencapai sekitar 7 hampir 8 kelurahan sudah menjadi Kampung Germas. Ini sangat penting bagi masyarakat. Kampung Germas ini bukan hanya sekedar deklarasi atau juga sekedar menyampaikan ada beberapa aktor yang menjadi berperan untuk kampanye, tapi juga di sana menyampaikan bahwa hidup yang lebih sehat itu tentu akan dimulai dari keluarga dan masyarakat kelurahan, dan ini tentu akan menyumbang sharing terhadap kota dan kota terhadap Indonesia, tentunya terhadap dunia juga. Jadi movement sekecil mungkin gerakan ini akan dibangun dari mulai dengan kelurahan atau pemerintahan terkecil. Ini Kampung Durian juga yang ketiga. Kampung Durian ini merupakan kekhasan juga untuk mempertahankan kekhasan di daerah Bogor Selatan. Sama dengan Kampung Ciharasas, ini kekhasannya masih berupa alam yang hijau, terbentang luas berupa pertanian. Di sana masyarakatnya sepakat untuk mempertahankan kawasan hijau ini dan sama-sama mengelola menjadi satu kawasan agro-edowisata organik. Demikian. Ini Labirin juga merupakan kampung khas tematik, di mana mungkin pada saat pandemi ini menjadi satu pilihan. Tidak bisa pergi kemana-mana, mungkin terbatas juga untuk akses ke sana kemari gitu untuk daerah keluar Kota Bogor. Ini untuk selama pandemi ini sangat membantu lah untuk pemenuhan kebutuhan rekreasi dan spot foto yang biasanya anak muda sekarang sangat viral untuk bisa terus eksis di media sosialnya seperti itu. Ini kampung warna-warni juga. Dan yang terakhir ini ada Bogor Berkebun. Ini merupakan semangat juga untuk merespon secara positif kondisi pandemi COVID-19. Bogor Berkebun ini kolaborasi dari komunitas yang tadi saya sebutkan di atas. Ada Forum Kota Sehat, juga ada Dinas Pertanian Ketahanan Pangan yang tentunya terus melakukan fungsinya sebagai fasilitator. Dan di sana Bogor Berkebun ini sudah cukup banyak menghasilkan kemandirian untuk pemenuhan kebutuhan sayuran di masyarakat, dan masih perlu dikembangkan lagi di beberapa kelurahan yang lainnya. Tentunya ini harus menjadi respon yang positif juga di kelurahan lainnya. Jadi ini merupakan proses untuk mendaur ulang permasalahan atas sampah, permasalahan atas limbah, dijadikan kompos, dan tentunya akan dikembalikan lagi ke alam. Semangatnya mungkin dari alam kembali ke alam. Jadi apa yang menjadi permasalahan tentu masih juga bisa menjadi potensi dan bahkan bernilai ekonomi. Next slide. Ya, barangkali itu cukup demikian sedikit sharing dari kami. Tentunya kami tidak merasa lebih baik, tapi kami juga berkolaborasi banyak tentunya untuk keluar dari permasalahan pembangunan ini, memanfaatkan aktor-aktor yang ada, yang hadir, datang, dan kami tentu juga menyambut baik apa yang menjadi tentunya harapan bersama untuk bisa membangun kota yang lebih baik, kota ramah keluarga. Mungkin itu yang dapat kami sampaikan sharingnya. Terima kasih Miss Kay atas kesempatannya. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih, Ibu Risna. Thank you very much for your presentation, and very interesting and very nice to see, I think, a lot of local efforts that are happening in Bogor, really engaging with women and making sure that we address a lot of these issues that we are discussing in today's event. So I think we are running a bit behind. So I wanted to now hand over and I think listen to a message from Miss Cherry Barnuevo. She will be highlighting the role of community-based organizations in air quality and climate change action. So may I request for the play? Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Cherry Barnuevo. I'm the Secretary General of Solidarity of Oppressed Filipino People, formerly known as DAMPA. We are a community-based organization of urban poor families, organized in 1995. Currently, we have 67 active grassroots women community-based organizations throughout the Philippines. Our organization has been involved primarily in women's organizing towards enabling disaster risk mapping at the community level and engaging local governments to prevent and mitigate disaster risk, as well as creating community savings and food banks, both to address women's economic empowerment and as support to humanitarian response. Community-based organizations such as ours have long-standing relationships at the household and community levels. Our intimate knowledge of our members and the communities where they belong puts us in a strategic position to influence our members towards positive behavioral change. We use their language, hence it is easier for us to engage with them. We co-create with them our projects, and so there is greater commitment and ownership from everyone for its processes and outputs. We are also women and coming from urban poor communities, hence we are them. Community-based organizations such as ours were able to lobby and advocate to local governments. And with us and our members coming from the poor and the marginalized, we were able to claim our spaces in policy and decision-making bodies and processes. Our belief is that our being poor and marginalized is not a hindrance, but our power to assert good and responsive governance. But there are structural inequalities that we need to address. Community-based organizations working for the poor and marginalized will lack the information as well as capacities to contribute to air quality and climate change. The jargons make it harder for us to engage both at the level of our constituents, experts, and governments. We need to work together to unpack these jargons and concepts on air quality and climate change to enable us to reach as much constituents as possible. Our resource are our people, but we still need other resources. The resources that we need are those that would enable us to shape and design interventions that not only enable us to respond to the impacts of poor air quality and climate change, but most importantly, to prevent hazards and lessen our vulnerabilities as poor and marginalized. Living among low-income families and living and working in precarious conditions, urban poor community-based organizations are in the strategic position to co-design people-centered interventions, innovations, and technologies based on our indigenous knowledge and experiences navigating our status and conditions in our society. We thank Clean Air Asia for giving us this space. We need platforms and spaces such as this to engage, speaking our own language and as people from the poor and marginalized sector. We need spaces where we can call for transparency and accountability of global, regional, and national commitments and resources that often set us aside. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ms. Clara, for the very inspiring message. And it's very clear that we need to speak at the same language that we all understand. And I think we are running very much behind, but just to say thank you for our panel for your very valuable insights. And it's really clear that we must push for policies to be inclusive as possible. And a lot of these policies to address air pollution and climate change should employ gender, child-centric approaches, and I think overall apply a human-based, human rights-based approach. So just to say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to join you for this session, and looking forward to continue the discussion online and potentially in the future in person as well. So let me now hand the floor back to Dang to continue with the rest of the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you so much, Kay, and thank you to our panelists, Miss Susan, William, Miss Risna, and also Miss Cherry, who joined us through her recording. Again, I would like to thank you all for joining this session. And of course, there's still one more session for this afternoon. So I invite you to please go back to or click the join session button, and we will see you all on the session on showcasing low-cost nudges and citizen science, a good practice exhibition. So thank you everyone to our panelists and speakers and audience. See you later. Bye. Thank you everyone.